Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep into organized crime. You sent over some really interesting articles and research, and I gotta say, I was pretty surprised by some of the stuff I read.
Yeah, it's kind of like a rabbit hole. You can get lost in it. I think a lot of people they think about like mobsters and Hollywood and all that, but the reality is it's a lot more complicated and a lot scarier.
Right. Okay, so before we get into all that, let's set the scene. We're looking at organized crime, but not just like as a concept. We're gonna unpack how these groups actually work the stuff they do and how they affect the world.
Yeah, and I think what's really going to be interesting for you is how it's all changed. We're going to look at the history of it, but also how they're adapting to the internet and stuff like the dark web and crypto.
Yeah, for sure. So to even start, like, how do we even define organized crime? Like, what makes it different from, I don't know, someone mugging you on the street?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. There are a few things that make it different. It's about structure.
Hmm.
These groups are like businesses, illegal businesses, but with a hierarchy, like
Yeah.
with specialized roles. Like the Italian Mafia, you've got the boss to the underboss, captains, soldiers, associates. Every level has their own jobs.
So it's like a corporation, but like with more violence and way less paperwork.
Exactly. And just like a corporation, they're playing the long game. Organized crime groups, they're not looking for a quick buck. They're building empires. They want to make money over time.
Yeah.
And to do that, they need control, and that's where it gets kind of scary. It's all about uh, coercion, corruption, violence, threats, bribes, all that to keep power and enforce loyalty and protect their interests.
That's pretty intense, the power they have. You mentioned specialization. What kind of careers, so to speak, are we talking about in this world?
Well, some specialize in drug trafficking. You've got groups like the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, the Ndrangheta in Italy. They control these whole supply chains.
Hmm.
Production, smuggling, distribution. They're making bank from drugs like cocaine and heroin.
I mean, we're talking billions of dollars, right? I think I read an article about Mexican cartels even using drones to smuggle drugs over the border. It's like they're constantly innovating.
They are, which is why they're so hard to stop. And it's not just drugs. You have groups that specialize in human trafficking, smuggling people across borders for forced labor, sexual exploitation. It's a huge problem worldwide. Really devastating.
That's awful, the amount of human suffering involved. It's hard to believe this stuff is still happening today.
And then you've got biker gangs, like the Hells Angels, the Outlaws. Their chapters, they're often involved in things like distributing drugs, arms trafficking, illegal gambling, even prostitution rings. They're all over the world, operating in a crazy number of countries.
Okay, so we've got these massive, established groups like the Mafia and Cartels. But organized crime also exists on a local level, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Street gangs,
Yeah.
like MS-13, the Crips and the Bloods. They're a part of communities. They might be smaller, but they're still responsible for a lot of drug dealing, violence, and other crimes.
It's a reminder that organized crime isn't just something that happens far away. It can be right here at home.
And more, it's happening online. Cybercrime is a growing area for organized crime. Groups dedicated to hacking, identity theft, online fraud, ransomware. They steal millions, billions from people and companies, and it's all in the virtual world, which makes it harder to trace and catch them.
It's like organized crime evolved with technology, right? They're
Right.
more sophisticated and harder to track now.
Exactly. It's this game of cat and mouse, constantly evolving. But I think what's important to understand is all these different groups, whether they're trafficking drugs or doing cybercrime, it's all about one thing: money.
Right. Profit. It's all about. Besides the drug trafficking and human trafficking we talked about, how else do these groups make money?
One of the biggest things is money laundering.
Right.
Cleaning their money and making it look, legit. It's a whole process. They use shell companies, offshore accounts. Sometimes they even invest in real businesses, to try to hide it.
It's crazy to think about. Making billions of dollars illegally and then trying to make it look like you earned it selling lemonade or something?
Yeah, right. It takes a whole network of people,
Oh.
accountants, lawyers, people willing to look the other way. And then there's extortion and racketeering. Basically, it's using threats and violence to get money from people, like the classic protection racket, pay us or else.
Oh, like in those movies where shop owners have to pay for protection from the gangsters who are threatening them?
Exactly. They create fear, and then they use that fear to make money. Organized crime, they're also involved in big fraud schemes, like credit card fraud, insurance fraud, even counterfeiting.
It's funny you mentioned that. I read about this group that was counterfeiting luxury goods like handbags, watches. They were selling them online and making a killing.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And then you can't forget about smuggling. They move all kinds of illegal stuff across borders.
Hmm.
Guns, drugs, fake goods, even endangered animals. It's all about avoiding taxes, and sometimes it's about exploiting people who are vulnerable.
It's mind-blowing how many different things they're involved in. They've got their hands in everything. But we can't forget about the human cost of all this,
Yeah.
It's not just about business.
Of course not.
Yeah.
We talked about human trafficking, but we have to talk about the violence that goes along with a lot of this stuff. Gang wars, assassinations, threats, innocent people getting caught in the crossfire. It's part of it.
I read this article, I think you sent it to me, about how violence from organized crime is actually going up in some places because of fights over drug routes and territory and stuff like that.
Yeah. And the violence, it affects more than just the people involved.
Yeah.
It makes whole communities afraid. It makes people lose trust, and it weakens the rule of law.
It's like this cancer, right,
Yeah.
that spreads through society. And when they start corrupting officials, like cops and judges, politicians even, it just makes it harder to fight back because our institutions are weaker.
It's a vicious cycle. The more power they get, the harder it is to stop them, which makes you wonder, what can we even do about it?
Right, because it can feel pretty overwhelming, to be honest. The whole thing is so big and complicated. Where do we even start?
Well, it's going to take a multi-pronged approach,
Uh,
for sure. Law enforcement plays a huge role. They investigate, they gather intelligence, they try to break these groups apart. The FBI here in the U.S., they have whole units just focused on organized crime.
So we've got people trying to, go undercover and get evidence to put these guys away, but these groups, they're not just in one place, right? They're all over the world. How do we deal with that?
That's where international cooperation comes in. Agencies like Interpol and Europol, they help countries work together to fight these criminal networks that operate across borders. Sharing information, coordinating investigations, extraditing criminals, seizing their money and assets.
So it's like a global task force, right? Everyone working together. What about the law? Are there specific laws for going after organized crime?
Yeah, for sure. Here in the U.S., we have the RICO Act, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. What it does is it lets prosecutors go after the whole criminal enterprise, not just individuals. It's a really powerful tool.
So instead of just catching a few low-level guys, they can go after the top dogs.
That's the idea. And then you have witness protection programs, really important for protecting people who are willing to work with law enforcement, give them new identities, help them start over.
It takes a lot of courage to do that, to speak out against these groups.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times without those witnesses, you can't get a conviction. So it takes everyone working together, law enforcement, international cooperation, the laws, and brave people willing to stand up and do the right thing.
We've talked about the traditional types of organized crime, but I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, the whole thing moving online.
Right. It's not just the old school gangsters anymore. The internet has changed everything.
Yeah, you mentioned cybercrime, but how is technology changing things for these groups? I mean, are we talking like sci-fi movie stuff here?
Well, not quite that dramatic, but it's getting pretty sophisticated for sure. The internet lets them connect all over the world and operate across borders. They can talk to each other anonymously, move money around electronically. It's all from anywhere in the world.
So it's like globalization, but for criminals. It sounds like they have a level of anonymity now that they never could have dreamed of before.
And it's not just communication. Think about the dark web, like a hidden part of the internet where criminals buy and sell all kinds of illegal stuff, and it's really anonymous.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that one. I've heard of the dark web, but I don't really get it. Sounds kind of creepy.
It can be. It's like this network of websites that are hidden from regular search engines. You need special software to even get to them. It's like a digital black market. You can find anything there. Stolen credit cards, weapons, drugs, you name it.
Wow, that's scary stuff. What about cryptocurrency? I know that's become a big thing lately, but I've also heard it's used by criminals.
Yeah, it's a favorite for money laundering and illegal transactions because it's decentralized and, pretty anonymous. Makes it really hard for the authorities to track the money.
So they're basically using the same tools as everyone else. The internet, crypto, all this fancy software. I guess technology can be used for good or bad, right? It's helping law enforcement, but it's also helping criminals.
Exactly. It's a two-sided coin. On one hand, technology gives law enforcement new tools. Surveillance, investigations, international cooperation, all that. On the other hand, it gives criminals new ways to do what they do and stay hidden.
It's an arms race, right? Both sides trying to stay ahead of each other.
Yep. And as technology gets more advanced, this whole fight is just going to get more intense.
It makes you wonder what's next, you know? We went from the old mafia families to these high-tech gangs online. What's come next? AI gangsters.
Rough. Yeah, maybe not AI gangsters just yet, but you can bet that organized crime is going to keep adapting. As AI, biotech, all these new technologies get more sophisticated, they'll find ways to use them to their advantage.
It's like something out of a movie, you know, where the bad guys are always a step ahead. But on a more serious note, we can't forget that organized crime, it's not just an idea, it has real effects on all of us.
I agree. We've talked about the money, the violence, the corruption, but it's easy to forget about it when it doesn't seem like it's affecting us personally.
So, how do we get people to understand that it matters, that it's not just a problem for the police to deal with?
I think it's about showing people how it affects them. When you have drug trafficking, it leads to addiction, overdoses. When you have human trafficking, it's people being exploited, families being torn apart.
And the financial crimes, they can hurt economies, lead to people losing their jobs.
Right. It all connects. Organized crime, it touches pretty much every aspect of our lives, even if we don't see it.
It's not just about gangsters, it's about the safety of our communities. It's about our institutions and the kind of world we want to live in.
Exactly. It's about understanding that organized crime is a threat to our way of life. It makes us less trusting of each other, less secure.
So, what can we do? Like, as individuals, in our communities, as a global society, how do we fight back? It feels kind of overwhelming, you know? Like, how do we even make a difference when we're up against something this big?
Well, I think awareness is huge. The more people know about organized crime, like how it works, what it does, the better chance we have of stopping it.
So, more knowledge is a good thing. But how do we go from knowing about it to actually doing something?
Well, if people know what to look for, that's a good start. Like being careful about scams, understanding how these financial crimes happen, knowing the signs of human trafficking, those things can really make a difference.
Right. So we can protect ourselves and our communities. What about like being more proactive? Is there stuff we can do to stop it from happening in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. Strong communities are less likely to be taken advantage of. If people are looking out for each other, reporting anything suspicious, working together to deal with things like poverty, it makes it a lot harder for organized crime to take hold.
So it's about building up our communities from the inside.
Exactly. And supporting those organizations that work with kids, job training, things that bring people together, that can prevent crime before it even starts.
Okay, so we've got individuals being aware, communities being strong. But this is a global problem, right? What about the international stuff? Is just cooperating between agencies enough?
It's a good start, but it could be better. We need to keep building those relationships between law enforcement, intelligence agencies, the courts, all across the world. Sharing information more, coordinating investigations, making sure criminals can't just hide in another country.
I mean, it sounds like a logistical nightmare trying to get all those countries working together smoothly.
It's not easy, and we have to close those legal loopholes that criminals use to their advantage. We need a legal system, globally, that's designed to go after organized crime.
And of course, there's technology. We talked about how organized crime is using it, but can we use it to fight back?
Definitely. We need to invest in research and development, create new technology to track their activity, like better data analysis, artificial intelligence, stronger cybersecurity, all those things.
So we use our technology to outsmart them, stay one step ahead. Are there ways we can use it to help people and communities, too?
Oh, yeah. Think about, apps where people can report crimes anonymously or get information about what's going on in their area. Technology can also connect people with resources, to help them stay safe.
So we're talking about a lot here. Individuals, communities, global cooperation, technology. What about the government? What can they do to make things harder for organized crime?
They have a big role to play. They need to make sure law enforcement, intelligence agencies, the courts have the money and resources they need, training, equipment, enough people so they can do their jobs effectively.
It's about giving the good guys what they need to fight the bad guys. But it's not just about money, right?
No. We need strong laws against things like money laundering, corruption, human trafficking. And it's about making sure those laws are enforced. We need a culture where people follow the law and where corruption is not okay.
That's a big task, changing the culture of a whole country. But I guess what we're talking about is a whole system approach, looking at the problem from every angle.
Exactly. This isn't just a police problem. It's everyone's problem. We all have to work together to make a safer world.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening. We've talked about how organized crime works, what they do, how to fight back. It's a constant battle, for sure.
And it's a battle we can't ignore. There's too much at stake.
But it's not hopeless, right? If we keep talking about it, if we raise awareness, if we push our leaders to do something, if we support the people fighting on the front lines, we can make a difference.
Absolutely. Remember, organized crime needs secrecy to survive.
Hmm.
If we expose them, talk about it, understand what they do, we can take away their power.
That's a great point. So to everyone listening, stay informed, stay involved, stay safe, and remember we all have a role to play in making the world a safer place.
Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the world of organized crime. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.